And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Mark Green. Mark is a strategic advisor and coach to CEOs and executive teams. He is an author. He's a consultant. He has a BA from Washington University with a major in psychology and a minor in business administration. So I guess you can play those two either way to be a coach and consulting. You must have known early on that you're going to wind up coaching CEOs if you got the psychology background. So anyway, welcome aboard, Mark. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Peter. So nice to be here.
Cool. So you just recently, in the last 6 months, maybe 8 months or so, came out with your first book. And let's talk a little bit about sort of why you decided to write a book and then sort of some of the hows, because you have to make lots of decisions along the way there. So it'd be interesting to chat about that for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my book, Activators, A CEO's Guide to Clear Thinking and Getting Things Done, was published in October of 2018. And as a practitioner, I had colleagues and clients whispering in my ear for years, Mark, you should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book. And it was something I resisted quite actively for a long time. And the reason is I just kept thinking to myself and saying to them, I don't want to write a book until I feel like I have something new to say, something to add to the conversation. Because as we know, there's a lot of practitioners who put books out that's essentially a regurgitation of somebody else's stuff, right? And I was bound and determined not to be that guy. And so about 2 years ago, I finally realized I had the idea, I had the thing, and it was the seed that ended up sprouting into Activators. And so that's what kicked off the process of actually writing the book. It was waiting for the moment that I felt like I really had something to add.
Got it. So I like the concept of being disciplined enough to wait until you had something to add to the equation and add to the conversation. So how did you narrow it down to activators? Because there's lots of things, given your experience coaching a wide variety of CEOs and such, you could fall into the typical trap of talk about growth, let's talk about leadership, let's talk about accountability, et cetera. But where did it come from, and then how did it wind up in the book?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that it's right in front of all of us and we never see it. And so when I realized what this was and I named it, it became very clear it was the right thing to do. It's this idea of why are we in our own way? Why is it that we know what to do, but yet oftentimes we don't act on what we know or make decisions aligned with what we know we should be doing, but then we don't. And it's like this blind spot in business, this invisible thing. I call them hidden growth killers because they're hidden to us. And but I observed it in myself, I observed it in my coaching colleagues around the world, and I observed it in all of my clients. And I felt like there was really nobody in a very applied, practical way tackling this topic about how do we overcome this, because the last thing anybody needs, at least in my opinion, is another book on strategy, right, or another book on execution, or another book on how to hire, because the best thinking is already out there in those areas. And the question I would always ask is, well, if you know about those things and you know how to do those things, why aren't you actually doing them?
Right, right.
And that's the space. That's my space.
I love it. So now you've narrowed down. This is the it, right? So activators is going to be the it. Now there's a whole bunch of things you got to untangle in terms of how do I publish and who do I publish with, and distribution, and so give us sort of the condensed version of the before and after in terms of what you've learned, why you made the decisions that you made, and which of those decisions you're happy with, and which of those you might have, knowing what you know now, maybe made a different decision.
Yeah. So I self-published is the short answer, and I hired an outfit to help me write the book and project manage the book. Now, ironically, I'm quite a good writer. And so I hired an outfit to help me from a structural and project management point of view, but also from a writing point of view, because I knew that if I was going to do it myself, I would just never have the discipline to do it. And I figured having somebody to partner with on it would be a great facilitator of the process. And in fact, that's exactly how it worked. So I was very happy with that part.
So I want to push on that piece for a minute because that's an important point. There's a million titles or whatever out there, whether it's a writing coach or whether it's a ghostwriter or whether it's whatever. But I think there's what you touch on is there's lots and lots of reasons to not do this alone. So one is the sort of forced accountability of having a partner, someone that's got some experience. It's interesting that you said that you happen to be a good writer. ironically, many
Yeah.
authors aren't, right? And that's not, it's, and it actually is not even a hurdle to becoming an author, right? That not being a good writer, there's ways to fill in those skill gaps. So it was interesting that when you were looking for a partner, it's not necessarily the ghostwriter that can turn your non-sentences into readable sentences, but it was more about the accountability and the process around how do you put a book together and the table of contents and big how long should a chapter be and is 11 chapters enough or should it be 27 or like all those things. So you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is a matter of integrity for me,
Sure.
because I work with clients all the time and counsel them that, you wanna bring in the expert in a domain where you don't have expertise, that, yeah, you could do it on your own, you probably could and figure it out over time,
Yep.
but why? Why would you do that? It's like you wouldn't give yourself brain surgery, you go find a brain surgeon, and I just felt the same way. I'm not an author, I'm a practitioner, and here I am about to write a book, so I better get some professional help with this. And it was funny because the people I hired were actually very impressed that I had a very clear strategy, a very clear target customer, a very clear message. Like all this was fleshed out. So this isn't a vanity book that I wrote, but a content-rich, really meaningful book. I just needed a partner to help me make it happen, and that's the path I took.
Well, I love the idea of finding the expert, right? Because I think the mistake a lot of first time authors make is, hey, listen, I'm pretty smart. I've run a business. I've done this. Here's all my accomplishments, my degrees, etc. How hard can this be, right? Like, well, it's actually quite complicated. So, um,
Well, it's this idea that you write a book and you're touting your own expertise in the hopes that other people hire you for your expertise.
right,
Well, you better be darn willing to hire other people for their expertise.
exactly.
Otherwise, the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. Great. So you find this group. They help you on the process side, and then let's talk about getting the book ready to launch. What you did around launch, and sort of other decisions that you made along the way.
So my mindset around this is it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
So I was much less about creating a bestseller in the first month and the launch and all of these kinds of things. And there's a much longer story behind that we don't need to get into now. But I chose the longer path. So I essentially bootstrapped the launch. I did my own social media stuff. I worked through my networks, and I was pretty pleased with the way the launch went. We didn't set the world on fire, but a lot of people knew that I put the book out, and it started generating other opportunities for me, mostly speaking to leverage the book, which is really the goal.
So the long path is a really important point. So I think that what happens is sort of there's every industry, every business has a natural cadence, right? So the fashion industry has certain times a year it comes out with new things, and the academic world has the fall semester, the spring semester. Most people in sort of the book industrial complex, if that's a thing, if you will, sort of think of a book as a short-term product, right? You're going to launch your book, and then this, and this, and this is going to happen, and that'll take about 90, 120 days, and then we all go home, right? And I think the reality is when you're making the investment in the book, not just the dollar, but the investment of your time, which is equal to or greater than dollars, you should be looking at that as a longer term investment that can be amortized over several years. Because I would argue that whether someone picked up your book a week after it was published or 3 years after you're published, to the right person at the right time, it should be equally relevant and inspire them to do something, such as reach out and hire you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the book and the concept of the book is a platform for me, not an item, and it does not have a shelf life because of my view of what I'm going to be doing with this over time. And my goals are very clear. And ironically, for myself as a practitioner, one of my goals for this enterprise is actually not to generate additional coaching clients for myself.
Okay.
Because I'm ready to move on to the next chapter. And that's another reason why I'm not in that big of a rush with this, because this is the beginning of a next chapter for me, not, sort of, wow, my practice isn't full. I better write a book and maybe that'll help me fill up my practice.
Okay, so let's talk about that because there's different reasons to write a book. So one reason might be, hey, I'm a coach or a consultant, and this will help me either increase my fees or fill up my book of business or whatever the case is. To you, that's not the goal. So what is the goal to transition from more coaching, consulting, hands-on to speaking or something else, or what's the goal?
Yeah, so it's there's a lifestyle aspect to it for sure. I want to move away from being a practitioner, have the opportunity to do more travel, especially with my wife. That's a piece of it for me. Number two, I want more leverage on my life's purpose, which is to unlock human potential, and I feel like this book has the opportunity to do it. And my work as a practitioner is limited in scope, and I get more reach and impact with the book. Number three, I actually want to generate opportunities for my coaching colleagues around the world that I know and that I'm in network with, and I'll be able to monetize that. They'll be able to pick up new clients, and the clients win because they'll get great coaches. And I also want to generate interest in coaching as a profession to refer people back into the network that I'm a part of. And so again, it's more about creating for others here in service of my own purpose while being able to achieve my lifestyle goals. And I thought very, very deeply about this from the outset around these are the goals for this.
Okay.
And I'm very clear with it. It surprises a lot of people because people are shocked like that I'm not looking for coaching clients. And frankly, that's actually the last thing I need right now.
Which is great. So, based on your goals and based on where you are now, what are the things that have worked out really well for you relative to the book? And what are the things that are maybe still a challenge or even a positive surprise? What are the unexpected things that might have unfolded?
Sure. Well, my goals for this year, for 2019, is to figure out the model. And then next year, 2020, is more about really rolling out the model. And so this is a year of experimentation in Jim Collins' lexicon, firing bullets, not cannonballs, right? And so the things that are working is the book is absolutely has cachet. It's absolutely resonating with the right people. It is absolutely leading me to speaking opportunities. I've figured out that because of the nature of the topic and the tools that I have, it's best suited for a half or a full day workshop, probably
Okay.
more than a keynote, because you can't really get into it that way. And what else am I learning? I'm also learning by doing through my work on social media in terms of how to build content and how to begin the process of creating engagement through content. Because that's a relatively new thing for me. Because again, my coaching practice has been full for years, so I haven't really had to do a lot of organic marketing.
Got it. Got it. So, what are the, if any, doors per se that have been opened for you as a result of being an author versus not being an author? Because there's this weird thing that happens, like right after you publish, where your friends, your neighbors, people, people think that you're way smarter than you were the day before, and there's sort of the secret handshake. So, give me a sense of sort of what opportunities have presented themselves to you that you don't believe would have if you didn't have the book.
Oh, well, I mean, the first thing obviously is there's no way I'd have the kind of speaking opportunities that I have and am able to create the kind of engagement I'm creating around that without the book and the platform for the book. So to me, that's really the singular biggest thing. I think in general, I definitely have observed people look at me a little bit differently when I'm introduced as a coach and an author. And there's interest around the first question is usually, "Wow, what's your book? What's it about?" That kind of thing. And so it's a very high engagement door opener.
Interesting, interesting. What else would you maybe have done differently? Anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
Yeah, the partner I picked for the book, it turned out to be a very challenging
Okay,
process. They didn't provide me with the leadership I was looking for. We had some challenges with the first writer. I ended up with a second
okay.
writer. I almost feel like I'm at a place that when it comes time for book number two, I'm in a position to general contract it myself and build my own team. And I think that was a real lesson learned because I ended up in this role, even though I was ostensibly paying someone else to do it. And now that I've learned the process and I've sort of
Hmm.
demystified what's behind the black curtain around this, I feel like I'm in a place to do it differently next time.
Got it. So tell us, I guess, a little bit around your core business now, where it is and where it's going. Because I would imagine if I were to retain you as a coach, even though you're not hiring clients, you're not bringing on clients right now, a lot of the thinking and the mindset and the philosophy that's baked into activators would be something that I'd be exposed to from working with
Yeah, no doubt. So my clients today are CEOs running high growth mid market firms, and think now probably 50 million on the floor and 400 million on the ceiling, roughly is the span for revenue. And I engage with the CEO and their executive team as a team in a team coaching format, and then I also spend some one-on-one time with the CEO. So that's kind of my space. I'm focused around four key decision areas: strategy, people, execution, and cash. And of course, the secret sauce to my ability to be effective with my clients is to help them get the heck out of their own way. And it's this sort of amorphous leadership thing that really gets into why is it that behavior is hard to change, and why is it that our beliefs get in our way, and why is it that sometimes we have fears that prevent us from doing the right thing. And we unpack all of those things, not necessarily in a formal classroom way, but more in a coaching way based on whatever situation is presenting itself to us.
One thing that I see folks sort of have a bit of trouble unpacking or making decisions around are how much to put in what format, right? So if you've got the book, it's going to lay out sort of your whole, not your whole, but a good chunk of your thinking and your processes and methodologies, right? Then you've got a keynote, which is an hour, so it's obviously less. Can't do the whole book in an hour. Then you've got workshops. Then you've got coaching. How do you decide sort of the right amount of content to put around in each format in each situation?
It's gotta be driven by the audience. It's gotta be driven by the audience, because otherwise I'm putting together what interests me, not what interests them or where their needs are.
Okay.
And interestingly, as you were kinda ticking off all those different, delivery mechanisms, in my brain, each of those almost has a slightly different audience, and that's what drives my decision making around what content to include and how to include it. My favorite mode, quite frankly, is just free form. Like literally walking into a room with people saying, "All right, what do we need to talk about today?" And having stuff just come up and having us just get to work. And I don't use PowerPoint, I don't use a speech, I don't use anything except my brain and a whiteboard and my mouth and my ears, and magic happens.
Got it. But that works in real time with someone that's incredibly seasoned and experienced. How do you accomplish sort of that same thing when you're putting it in a modality where you're not part of the delivery vehicle, right? So if you were to package some of this, a book, you're not there with me when I'm reading the book. So how do you decide that in those circumstances where you're not there to be able to sort of improvise or go with the flow, if you will?
Well, I think the biggest thing is emotionalizing the content to the point where people understand, how it impacts them. And this is a real challenge with my content in activators, because much of what this content is about is stuff we can't see, right? So, and things that people actually deny pretty actively. And so I emotionalize it by asking questions like, have you ever had somebody on your team that you knew is the wrong person for the team, and yet you decided to keep them anyway,
Yeah, right. We've
right?
all been there,
Like
right?
like, what is right, like, why is that? And what does that cost you over time? And by the way, where else do you do things like that, where you know what to do, but then you choose not to do it? And do you ever wonder, like, is there a way to stop that? And by the way, what would the return be if you were able to stop that? And not just you, but your members of your executive team, and then actually everybody who works in your company. And so I use those kinds of things to really create the engagement on something that's very amorphous, and intangible, and then kind of guide people through a process where they can sort of self-select and say, "Oh, well, this issue is more important to me than that one. Therefore, I'm going to play with this tool first, as opposed to this other tool over here." And I have a sense of the tools that are resonating more with more people, like sort of more popular items of where people have dysfunction in their brain, and so I tend to lead with those as well.
That's awesome. So this has been great. You've shared so much with us that I think is incredibly valuable for folks when they're thinking about publishing, when they're thinking about not publishing, how to do it, how to integrate it into your business, etc. Any last nuggets to share with folks? Like, think about this, or definitely don't do that, or any other things you can share with us?
Y Yeah, absolutely. Look, as a practitioner, you've gotta create a strategy for whatever it is you're doing, and you've gotta have integrity. You've gotta eat your own dog food. and be very, very careful not to fall into the trap of not having those two things and yet being in a position of probably advising clients that they should have those things. And we tell our clients they should have these things for a reason. These things work. And just because we're a solo practitioner or have a small firm doesn't absolve us from the benefits of operating with these disciplines.
Right. No, well said. Anyway, I thank you for coming on today. Thank you for sharing everything that you did. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much.
Hey, Peter, I appreciate it. Thank you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.